Not until we get to something like Breath of the Wild. I can already tell that that one is gonna be over 3 hours. Anyways, while I said I don't really have a schedule for these, I do have in mind some videos that I'm 99% sure will come out during the summer. Or before October at the very least. First of all, in a week or so I'll probably be releasing the Ocarina of Time Akira Himekawa manga review, and after that I might release some videos on random topics or games or something. So that was a fucking lie. So as it turns out, I'm terrible at keeping promises. Gee, I wonder who could have seen this one coming. So I never ended up actually making that video on the Ocarina of Time manga adaptation, as well as the other videos that I promised would come out this year. Until now, it's the Ocarina of Time manga video, everyone, woohoo! Anyways, let's get right into the matter. So if you've dabbled into parts of the Zelda franchise other than the games, chances are you may have seen one or multiple of these manga. These are the Akira Himekawa Zelda adaptations, adapting the most popular Zelda titles into manga form, with the Ocarina of Time adaptation being the first of these adaptations. I'm gonna get through the boring technical stuff first so that there's no confusion once we get to the part where we actually talk about the manga itself. The Ocarina of Time manga adaptation, along with the rest of the series, was written and illustrated by Akira Himekawa, a collaboration project by two women known as A. Honda and S. Nagano. It was first released in Japan by Shogakukan in 2000 and made available in English through Viz Media in 2008, with a premium edition called Legendary Edition containing some colored pages and the entire story in one volume being released in 2016. This specific manga is a two-parter and is separated into two main parts. The first one is just called Ocarina of Time, although I personally like to call it The Boy Without a Fairy, as it follows the young Link part of the story, and the other one being called The Hero of Time, which follows the adult Link part of the story. These two take up about 300 pages, with the last 100 pages or so being reserved for two original short stories written by Akira Himekawa themselves, which I'll talk about in a later section of the video. Okay, before getting into the actual manga itself, I just want to say a few things first. Note that in this video, all pages, speech bubbles, and the way they're ordered and read is from right to left, in order to stay consistent with the structure of the manga. So here, for example, you'd start on the top right corner of the right page, then move to the left, then move down, and then move on to the next page and do the same thing. I messed this up in my Ataru Kajiwa adaptations video, where some pages were ordered from left to right, so I'm just saying this in advance to avoid confusion. This time the pages are actually properly ordered. Also, this video isn't the speed reading of the manga. I think that would be a little bit boring, and I think just talking about what I like and dislike about the manga would be a lot more entertaining. If you want to read these for yourself, you can use the manga scans available on Internet Archive. It is 100% free and legal to read them this way. All you need is an account which you can make for free, and you can borrow these for up to an hour as many times as you like. 4 of the 5 legendary editions are available to read here along with the Minish Cap, but unfortunately Phantom Hourglass has been taken down for unknown reasons. I'll see if I can upload scans of my own copy to it when I actually remember to do that. If you want to support the creators, and in turn, unfortunately, Nintendo as well, you can buy these off of Amazon, Crunchyroll's shop, Barnes & Noble, or any other website or bookstore that sells them. I'll leave the links to both the Internet Archive, as well as where you can buy them in the description. Okay, now it's time to talk about the adaptation itself. So, this adaptation isn't a one-for-one retelling of the story of Ocarina of Time, it's changed up somewhat. Some parts are almost identical to the game, and some are completely different. There's some extra scenes here that I kinda like. Like, for example, on this first page we get to actually see Link being dropped off in front of the Great Deku Tree by his mother, which is a plot point that's normally only explained in the manual and is absent in the actual game. I say I kinda like the extra scenes because for the most part they're pretty cute and inoffensive. For example, here Volvagia is portrayed as a random baby dragon that Link bought in Hyrule Castle Town when he was a kid, and then in the Fire Temple, Link has to kill it because it's gone mad due to Ganondorf's influence, and Sheik decides to spend some time to help Link overcome his emotions in order to free the Gorons from Volvagia's reign. Or for another example, Zelda meets Link when he first arrives at Hyrule Castle Town, and spends the day with him as a commoner, getting one last day of her childhood before formally meeting the Hero of Time as the Princess of Destiny. That last one is actually pretty cool, and I kinda wish it was in the actual game. Like I said, there are no drastic changes that completely change the narrative or anything. I mean, it's still the story of Ocarina of Time, it's like basically perfect, there's not much that warrants being changed. But you know, there's enough new stuff to keep the manga fresh and different from the source material, which I personally dig. And I mean, this is an adaptation, so some stuff is obviously gonna differ from the original, since here you're getting a different interpretation of the story. And that isn't always a bad thing. Like, I just gave you a few examples of good changes, but then there's some stuff here that I would say was completely unnecessary and that ruins the story a bit with its inclusion. Like, for example, this plot point of Sheik being an undercover agent working for Ganondorf is just dumb. Like, Ganondorf is not suspicious of Sheik almost at all here, and he also puts her in charge of the Find the Princess squad. And then when she betrays him and turns out to actually be Zelda in disguise, Ganondorf is utterly shocked by this. It's completely different to how it was in the game, where he didn't even bother with searching for Zelda, because he knew she'd show up eventually once Link progressed far enough. Instead, here he's constantly searching for her and can never find her. It just makes him seem less intelligent, which ruins the character a bit for me. Not to mention that this whole part where Sheik goes all, "I was never one of you," just feels dumb. Like, guys, are you really shocked that Ashika has betrayed you? You know, one of the guys who've served the royal family of Hyrule and the reincarnation of Hylia for literally thousands of years? I mean, I kinda get his minions, but Ganondorf falling for this? Really? Oh, never mind actually, it turns out that in this adaptation the Sheikah were betrayed by the royal family and Ganondorf thinks that Sheik is seeking revenge for the act. And actually, I'm kinda okay with that being the reason why we don't see Sheikah in the game. It's an okay thing to include considering how they weren't really fleshed out for the longest time, especially in this game, but I just can't see Ganondorf falling for this, it just makes him seem dumb. I mean, Ganondorf's still menacing, he just lacks that 2 steps ahead part of his personality that he had in the game. I think people kinda underestimate just how smart Ganondorf actually is. Ganondorf is kinda like Aizen, maybe a little bit smarter. I mean, either way, you don't wanna fuck with this guy at all. Actually, now that I think about it, it's actually kind of surprising how similar a lot of aspects of Bleach are to Zelda, and Ocarina of Time specifically. I mean, I would not be surprised one bit if Kubo came out and said that Aizen and Ichigo were directly inspired by Ganondorf and the Hero of Time, or even if Zelda and Sheik were inspirations for Urahara and Yoruichi to some extent. Anyways, sorry guys, I don't really get a lot of opportunities to talk about Bleach on my Zelda YouTube channel, so please let me have at least this much. But yeah, Ganondorf in this version is just a lot dumber than in the game, which is definitely evident with things like him not suspecting Sheik of being a traitor, or not realizing that the Fairy Ocarina is in the Ocarina of Time for 7 years. Like, okay, are you seriously gonna sit here and tell me the guy who orchestrated and manipulated the trajectory of Link's entire life wouldn't be able to tell a fake Ocarina of Time from a real one? And I mean, even if he had the real Ocarina of Time, he doesn't know how to play the Song of Time, so it would be useless for him to have it, which is why in the game he tricks Link into playing it. And what the fuck was he doing for 7 years? Like, wouldn't you try to use the Ocarina the moment you got it? Like, how did it take him 7 years to figure this shit out? Come to think of it, what the fuck does Ganondorf need the Ocarina of Time for? He's already entered the Sacred Realm and claimed the Triforce of Powers, so like, what does he need it for? We must seize the Ocarina of Time. Brother, what for? You know the Ocarina is completely useless to you right now. Like, what do you need it for? He also introduces himself to Link when he's talking to Zelda in Hyrule Castle Garden, as opposed to their first encounter being right after Zelda and Impa run away from Hyrule Castle Town, making that scene a lot less impactful. In the game, Ganondorf only shows up 3 times throughout the entire thing, not counting Phantom Ganon, so it was always menacing to see him. But since here he shows up every once in a while, it just comes off as less menacing. Even his speech before his boss fight comes off as less of an evil mastermind telling you that you've played right into his hands, and more just as a generic villain speech. I don't know, he's just kinda lame in this version. Some of these plot points with Ganondorf make me think the creators gave their own interpretation of the character, which makes him look significantly less intelligent than in the game. In general, he's just a straight up downgrade. I mean, he's still fine here, he serves his role as the villain pretty well, but going from one of the best villains in all of fiction to just kinda good is kinda disappointing. It's not enough to ruin the experience, but it did leave a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Okay, enough about Ganondorf, let's talk about Link now. Link talks in this one, just like in every adaptation I've covered so far, and I'm guessing that's gonna be the case for all of the future adaptations by Akira Himekawa as well. I know that's something I'm supposed to expect at this point, but I'd be lying if I said it doesn't catch me off guard every time. Personally, I think this version of Link is fine. He's definitely nowhere near the heights of Kajiwa's Hero of Legend, but then again, this is the Hero of Time, not a Hero of Legend. So I suppose it's a little bit unfair to be comparing the two, especially since Kajiwa's Link was a teenager and a trained knight as well, and this Link is, well, a child, and one with zero training or combat skills prior to the events of the story. Although it's still kind of difficult for me to say that I like Link in this adaptation, but I also can't say I dislike him either. I feel like Akira Himekawa definitely wanted to lean towards depicting him as more childlike, which makes sense because even after he grows up, mentally Link is still a child. But you know, when I think of Link, I think of a calm, cool-headed, heroic badass, and not of a really talkative kid. I've said a few times before that I'm not a fan of the silent protagonist trope, but I feel like Ocarina of Time is one of those games where the protagonist being silent actually brings more to the game. I mean, Link talking certainly doesn't take away from it. Like, I didn't find it to be super annoying or anything, and I think this is turbo nitpicky here, but I just think most of the things he says are pretty much just what the audience would be thinking while playing the game anyways. Excluding the, attempts at romance scenes. I do kind of like how as a child he's just a big ass bum, but as an adult he gets a lot more serious, helping differentiate the two time periods more. Although he still retains some of that goofiness from time to time. But you can definitely feel how Ganondorf's influence on the world has taken a toll on Link as well. He also loves food, which is a common thing Mangaka put in their works because it's easy filler, so I get why that's here, even though it has nothing to do with the story of the character. And I also can't really criticize that, because that would mean I would have to criticize Kajiwa's Hero of Legend for being a big eater as well, even though I like that aspect of that character. All in all, I'm just kind of neutral on this version of Link, as opposed to being totally in love with the character like the game version. The game version will always be superior, and the game Hero of Time will probably stay as my favorite version of the character for the rest of the series, but I think this version does that character justice. Certainly doesn't butcher him or anything like that. I do really like how the Himekawa tandem draws Link's adult form. You can see he's athletic, but clearly muscular, and it feels like he's genuinely pretty strong, and he's also pretty clever when he becomes an adult, which I like. The Master Sword also looks incredible, and it looks like it genuinely has a lot of weight to it, but thanks to Link's physique, he has no trouble carrying it. Link's design overall is just really well done, and it fixes one of my only gripes with the Kajiva adaptations, that being that the weapons feel like they have no weight to them because of the way the characters are drawn. But one thing that I really do dislike about Link in this adaptation is how the Himekawa tandem definitely ships him with Zelda. Like, by the end of the manga, she even says she loves him before transporting him back to the child timeline. And, you know, the question of which of the four love interests the Hero of Time ends up marrying has been a pretty big discussion over the years, because in theory, the one Link ends up with by the end of the game, or rather when he grows up, is up for the player to decide. Like, it would obviously just be the one that you like the most. But, you know, ignoring Twilight Princess and everything, I still think it's pretty obvious he ends up marrying Malon. Like, okay, Saria's his childhood friend, and lots of people like the trope of childhood friends getting together, but let's be real, she's stuck in this child form. Ruto, okay, that one is super funny, like, that would be hilarious if it were actually canon, but realistically, she's a fish, you people. Now Zelda is royalty, and Link is a commoner. So, them getting together like in a fairy tale, I mean, maybe that could work if the story was a little different, but since this is Ocarina of Time, that just makes no sense, no matter how you spin it. Not to mention that after the events of each of the games, Zeldas don't generally interact all that much with their respective Links. Like in the case of A Link to the Past, for example, after the events of the story, Link and Zelda basically never speak again to one another. And as for Malon, well, Malon is Malon. I mean, do I really even need to say anything? And also, she's essentially Marin from Link's Awakening, which is just bonus points from me. I also really like this one panel of her where she has no neck for some reason. It looks so stupid and I adore it. In general, I was grinning every time Malon and Saria would show up on screen. I really like their designs here, and I also really like their characters. But as for the whole pseudo-romance with Zelda, yeah, I'm not really a big fan of the Himekawa duo shipping her and Link, because they should have read between the lines and realized that Malon was the obvious choice. I mean, she does get some time to crush on Link, but he doesn't seem like he's interested in her at all. You can clearly tell that the Himekawa duo really wanted to write a relationship between these two characters, but in the end I just can't see it being the case. I mean, I appreciate the effort and they're obviously allowed to do this if they want to. I think that's fine, I just think these two work a lot better as friends. There's actually like a few jokes where some characters point out that there's like random girls crushing on Link, which I guess that brings us to the humor. Personally, I thought the humor in this one was fine. It didn't really make me burst out laughing at any point. I mean, I was loving every single panel that had Ruto in it, and I thought Naboro was pretty funny as well, but I don't know, this humor isn't really my cup of tea. There's nothing super crude or weird or unfunny, it's just alright. There's also stuff like the Ruto engagement thing, which was in the original game as well, and I'm happy to report that it's just as funny here as it was there. I mean, I don't know, I fucking adore this plot point, it's so stupid and I love it so much. There's also stuff like Rauru mentioning how Link has multiple ladies fawning over him, and Navi getting mad at Link for liking Zelda more than Saria, even though he's never even thought of Saria as anything other than a friend. There's also the fact that Mido keeps complaining about how Link was always flirting with Saria, and then when he mentions that he probably has a girl outside of the forest that he's interested in, my guy fucking blushes. Like, it's so crazy to me. This story keeps trying to ship Link with Saria, but the Himekawa duo keeps shipping him with Zelda instead, as if he's never seen a woman in his life before. Like, every single other love interest works better than Zelda, and yet they keep trying to make these two a thing for some reason. I already talked about the art style a little bit before, but I want to talk about it some more now. So, if we take a look at Kajiwa's adaptation of A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, I mean, I personally adore his art style because it's very 90s and I'm really into that stuff, but that's not how everyone is gonna feel towards it. Like, I can definitely see someone just not being into this. The story is similar with Ishinomori's adaptation of A Link to the Past and also the Valiant Comics adaptations of Zelda 1 and 2. But when it comes to this manga, I think everyone will agree that it looks really good. I'm not sure which of the two Himekawa girls are in charge of the art, maybe it's both of them, but seriously, every page, every panel, every single minute detail, it's all just oozing with love and care that was put into this work, and the dynamic and engaging paneling brings so much life to the action as well. You can really tell how much this game meant to the authors and how they wanted to bring this world to life through these visuals. The artwork is seriously the best part of the whole manga, and I believe most of you would agree with me as well. Like, look at these pages. I know someone will go, well, it's just regular anime art, man, but like, shut up. Like, it's so goddamn beautiful, like, my boy is fucking beautiful, my girl is fucking gorgeous, look at them! I also love how they include iconic poses and scenes in the manga, like these images of young and adult Link being adaptations of promotional art drawn by Yusuke Nakano, this scene of Link pulling out the Master Sword, which in my opinion is just missing that hup sound that he makes and it would be perfect. This pose of Shadow Link being reminiscent of this adult Link promo art. This adult Link pose, lord I love the art in this manga so much. The backgrounds all have so much detail as well, and that combined with everything I've talked about thus far makes this manga a true work of art. So much emotion packed into every single scene, it's just beautiful. Also, while we're at it, this image gave me brain rot. You know, I originally planned to release this video last year around the time of the release of Kagurabachi, but we're so far removed from its initial announcement that this image has been memed so far into hell and back that I'm pretty sure no one even recognizes it anymore, so this joke is completely pointless. Anyways, as a professional Kagurabachi glazer, I'm obligated to tell you to go read it. So go read it. It's good. Okay, let's get back to talking about the characters. I already talked about Link and Ganondorf, but I guess I could talk some more about Zelda. She's fine. I like her, but this game unfortunately has my least favorite design for Zelda. Despite the incredible artwork, I don't think I will ever like this character design, unfortunately. There's also this scene that every chic as male theorist will always inevitably reference when trying to explain how that's actually a thing. That's about it regarding Zelda, since I already talked about her earlier, I won't talk about her much more here. So I guess next in line would be Navi. Navi was pretty much a non-character in Ocarina of Time, and functioned mostly as a hint machine that kept telling you where to go every 10 minutes. But here, Navi gets plenty of time to shine, and she brings some comedic relief to the manga. She also gives Link tips here, but don't worry, they're nowhere near as bad as in the game. Overall, I like Navi, 8 out of 10 character. I would have liked to see her as an actual fairy girl though. The sages all pretty much remain the same, as in their personalities aren't too different from their game counterparts, although the way Impa and Nabooru awaken as sages is pretty different, since the Shadow and Spirit temples don't exist in this adaptation. So Link finds Impa in Kakariko village, and she begins to train him for his fight with Ganondorf when suddenly the monster from the bottom of the well tries to kidnap a child from the village, and Link confronts it, which prompts the monster to transform into his shadow, which leads to the Link vs Dark Link encounter of the manga. I think this encounter is really cool. I personally like the Dark Link mini-boss in the Water Temple, but I know that lots of people have a problem with him. This encounter though is, well, you know, it's a cool fight. The fight has great choreography and it looks fantastic, obviously, because of the paneling and the incredible artwork. It's very fun to watch, or rather read. Once the fight is over, Impa gives the hero of time his signature readings, saying how it's a coming-of-age tradition for Sheikah boys, which I think is pretty cool, I totally dig this. Unfortunately, I think Impa awakens as a sage off-screen, because the next time we see her after this is when all of the 5 sages have awoken, which is super lame, like, come on, man. They literally forgot that Impa was in the story. They were like, wait, shit, she's supposed to be here as well, fuck. In this version, all of the Gerudo are mind-controlled by the twin Rova, and Naboru is the only Gerudo who isn't affected by them, and that's because during their fight in his jail cell, Navi tells Link to break the gemstone on her head, which makes her regain her consciousness and she decides to help Link. She sticks with him until they get all the way to Ganon's castle, and once they do, she gets called out by Raoru and just immediately wakes up as a sage, which I think is pretty hilarious, honestly. Like, they didn't even bother wrapping the whole thing up, she just awakens out of nowhere. I mean, it's better than what they did with Impa, I guess. Naboru is also a goofy goober here as opposed to being horny, which I much prefer to the original, honestly. I think it suits her a lot more. Love the faces as well. Raoru, Saria, Darunia and Ruto remain pretty much unchanged, although Saria is given a tiny bit more character depth, and Ruto's whole awakening thingy happens after Link parts with Impa, which is kinda interesting, but she's given very little screen time compared to the other sages, which I honestly dislike. Ruto was my favorite character after Ganondorf in the original game, so I'm pretty disappointed that she doesn't get more time to shine here. Her plotline remains intact though, so that's good at least. Zelda and Ganondorf I've already kind of talked about in the beginning, so I won't discuss them here, but honestly I think they're just worse written here than in the game. I mean, Zelda is fine and all, but Ganondorf is just so baffling to me. Like, come on guys, just make him cool and mysterious and don't reveal how he actually operates behind the scenes and you're good to go, like it's Ganondorf, come on man. This should be easy. Like, you know what's really funny about this? Apparently, all of the Akira Himekawa manga are first drafted and then sent over to Nintendo for approval, and once staff at Nintendo approve the concept, then they begin to actually draw for the manga. So someone at Nintendo read this and saw how nerfed Ganondorf's intelligence was, and they just went, yeah, that's cool, that's good. Does Nintendo not know how smart their own characters are? I mean, to be fair, I think this is straight up just the fault of the writers not understanding the character they are writing, and I think that will become much more evident once we talk about the 2 short stories featured in the manga. The first one being a young Link short story called Skull Kid and the Mask, and the other one being an adult Link short story called Roru of the Watarara. What is with this franchise and super complicated names? I'll go a bit more in-depth with these 2 stories because they're original stories that don't have anything to do with the games. They're set in the same universe, but obviously they're not canon to Ocarina of Time. Okay, so first up is the young Link short story, Skull Kid and the Mask. It's the longer of the 2 short stories, being roughly 50 pages long and split into 2 chapters, and in my opinion it's the better one of the 2 as well. The premise is simple. The story takes place before the events of the game, where there's some kind of play involving masks going on. Masks designate different roles, and the gang is unanimous that Saria should be playing the role of the fairy princess. Now, Mido says he wants to play the role of the fairy prince who protects the princess, but literally all of the forest votes for Link to play the role instead. Mido hides the prince's mask, and then when he gets exposed for it, it turns out that someone else stole the mask from the spot where it was hidden. Mido gets all angry and stuff cause no one believes him, and he does the only thing he's good at and starts being racist towards Link, as per usual. I hated this character before already, and yet the Himekawa ladies keep finding ways to make him more and more dislikable. I have no idea how. Like, I always found this character really amusing. He literally exists just to be Link's #1 op. Yes, even more than this guy, and that's as far as his character goes. There's like no depth to him whatsoever besides that one secret interaction in the Lost Woods. Like, he's literally just an asshole. Like, fuck you, Mido, whatever your fucking name is. Link and Saria go into the Lost Woods and find the Skull Kid who stole it because he's ashamed of himself because he has no face or something. He apparently knows Link from earlier and knows that he's the hero of time, or at least he seems familiar to him, and this little tidbit of information will never be elaborated upon ever again. Then it turns out there's some kind of evil Deku Tree rival named Baga Tree who commands the Skull Kids or something. Link goes into a battle with some of the wolves and then the Baga Tree almost kills him. Skull Kid tanks a shot for Link, then Mido and the gang show up and kill the Baga Tree. Like, this tree thing is so ass. He's not important to the story at all, he breaks canon, he's unlikable as shit, like fuck this guy, bro. Link and Mido then reconcile with this hard-ass image, feel free to screenshot, and then Link agrees to play the role of the monster with Mido being the fairy prince. And thus, Kokiri society has been saved. Okay, that's it for this one, moving on. The other bonus story is called Roru of the Watarara, and it's honestly one of the worst things I've ever read. Maybe that's a bit of a hyperbole, but this one is really, really not good. It's about 30 pages long, and it takes place during adult Link's and Navi's stay at Lake Hylia. The story starts off with Link stealing a fishing pole from the fishing range. Talk about a lawful good character, huh? I know this is supposed to be a joke and all, but seriously, Link would never do this. Not the game Link, not this Link either. This action completely contradicts his entire character and philosophy. Like, these guys broke his entire character just for the sake of this one joke. We then see Link fishing out of a river, with Navi being a dick to him by reminding him of how much nothing he's caught so far. Link then gets a big bite and fishes out a fucking bird person of all things. This is Roro. He's the prince of the Watarara tribe, a species original to this story, as it doesn't appear in any of the games. But as you might have guessed, they were actually an inspiration for the Rito, a species featured in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And the Wind Waker, but they look nothing like birds in this game. Roro is like Mido, but even worse and more annoying. He's a self-entitled brat that keeps destroying Dr. Mizumi's lab and traumatizing poor Navi, who says that they should just get rid of this guy because he's annoying and nobody likes him, which is completely valid. Like, it's completely out of character for Navi, but it's completely valid. But then Link is all like, we have to protect him, what will happen to him if we leave? Further proving that this is an inferior version of the character of the Hero of Time, one that is outclassed by the game version in most aspects. And of course, he could never compare to the GOAT himself. Once Navi gets sick of this guy, she actually leaves Link, which is completely impossible and would never happen, but is also pretty valid. I would do that as well. And then Link falls from the roof of the lab and fucking dies, and now I don't have to read this anymore. No, actually, it turns out he's fine. I forgot you can fall from a mountain and take damage equivalent to a scratch in this universe. Then Roro's being pissy again and some tornado shows up, and Link magically senses that this is a magical tornado and that these are Ganondorf's servants. Like, he can't see that this is a tornado made of fire, he can just feel that this is a magic tornado for some reason. Then Link turns to Navi to ask for help because Navi just magically knows what each enemy's weakness is for some reason. Like, I know in the game she knows everything about every enemy, but here the game logic doesn't work because how the hell is Navi supposed to know what these guys can do? Does she just have the knowledge of the whole universe in her 3-inch floating ball brain or something? Is Navi like an omnipotent god that lowers herself to the level of mortals because the Hero of Time is so chronically stupid that he thinks that helping a bird that he fished out of a river is more important than stopping Ganondorf? I know I'm being extremely nitpicky here, and that's mostly for the sake of comedy. Like, I'm well aware that this is supposed to show how Link is a kind and empathetic character that is willing to help even people that he doesn't know, but this bird kid is literally the most unlikable character that we've seen in this franchise so far, and on top of that, both of our main characters act like they're completely different people. Like, they don't act like Link and Navi whatsoever. Then while the bird kid is bitching and crying how he doesn't know how to fly, Navi shows up again, and then they beat up the bad guys, the bird kid learns how to fly, and his mom shows up. Then they leave and they're never seen again. And that's it. Honestly, I found the other short story to be at least somewhat interesting, but this one, it's so bad. Like, I don't want to be mean, but the other short story at least had the spirit of Ocarina of Time. Even though it's obviously not nearly as good, but this one is just a lame tale about an unlikable buddy character that you don't care about, that is just irrelevant to the universe he's in, and on top of that, the characters act super out of character. I mean, Link in the game doesn't have much of a character, and neither does Navi, but like, come on, this ain't it, chief. Whatever, the manga isn't canon anyway, so that means this story isn't canon either, and I fortunately never have to talk about it or think about it ever again. And at least we got Doritos from it. The last 2 pages of the manga are the Afterword, where the Himekawa tandem talks about the experience of working with Nintendo to make this project, and how this game impacted them as well. I'm not gonna read the full thing, as you can just do that yourself if you really want to, and it is a really good read in my opinion, but I'll describe what it's essentially about for those who are too lazy to read. It's unknown if this is Nagano or Honda writing, but essentially they describe how they were approached by Shogakukan, a small company that founded Shueisha and owns Viz Media, and how they went from not playing games at all to finding video games to be a beautiful and expressive medium, and how Ocarina of Time truly felt like a special game for both of them. They saw an ad for the game on TV back in 1998 and thought they both felt some kind of a special connection with the boy without a fairy. So yeah, Ocarina of Time was their first Zelda game, and honestly, I think it's a really good first entry into the series. I'll quote this last part here because I really like it. In elementary school, we both read a lot of manga magazines, and we agree that back then, it felt like 1 year was a much longer span of time than it seems now. That's why we refused to cut corners and treated this work with love and put all our care and effort into bringing it to life. We hope that you readers, who are even now on the cusp of adolescence, when the doors of responsibility are wide open, will feel the reality of The Legend of Zelda, and, even if just a little, find some of Link's purity in yourselves. It seems like this game is universally loved by everyone, and I personally find that to be a really good thing. With these new big releases being nothing but steaming piles of garbage that no one other than game journalists likes, it's easy to lose sight of what video games once were and just how incredible and impactful on a person a good game can be. Perhaps if all games were as good as Ocarina of Time, this medium would stop being treated by the media at large as just a mindless, pointless hobby that losers engage in, and would instead be recognized for what it actually is, a way to express oneself, just how this manga was a way for the Himekawa ladies to express themselves through their art. But until then, one thing is for certain: The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, no matter the medium, remains as one of the finest works of modern fiction, and after all this time, remains as one of, if not the single greatest video game of all time. As for this manga counterpart, I've complained a lot about it in this video, but I still like it as a whole, and while it's very flawed, I think it's still a pretty fun read. I think it's something that you will enjoy once you've already beaten the game and experienced the original story, as opposed to just reading it by itself. It's like a promotional comic, not as good as the game itself, but it's enjoyable if you've played the game. Speaking of which, there's also this exclusive promotional manga special, also written and illustrated by Akira Himekawa, made to promote the release of Ocarina of Time 3D in Taiwan and parts of China. It's pretty short, only about 15 pages long, and as you can see it looks a lot different from the original Ocarina of Time adaptation. It actually looks a lot closer to the Skyward Sword manga found at the end of the Hyrule Historia book, which makes sense cause it was released around the time of the release of Hyrule Historia, so over a decade after the release of the Ocarina of Time manga. Obviously the duo's art style has evolved since then. It's also got elements from Skyward Sword, like Link knowing that he's the goddess's chosen hero and stuff. Yeah, even in just 15 pages, Akira Himekawa found a way to sneak in a Skyward Sword reference. I swear, it's impossible to avoid spoilers for this game. Like, every time I even think about interacting with anything remotely related to Zelda, it always all comes back to this game. Like, wow guys, I love Skyward Sword so much, I can't wait to play it in 2027 when I've already been spoiled to death about it. Anyways, I'll leave the link to the promotional comic in the description as well if you wanna read the full thing. I figured I might as well talk about it here because it doesn't have enough in terms of quantity to make a whole video about, so if I didn't cover it here, I probably never would have covered it otherwise. But yeah, that kind of sums up the experience for me. The manga isn't the greatest piece of fiction ever written, it's got its problems, it's got its weird Japanese humor, the art is absolutely gorgeous, but the story is definitely inferior to the original. Nevertheless, I think it's a solid first Zelda adaptation for this duo. We'll see how the rest of the series holds up in the future. Next in line would be the Majora's Mask manga, and actually, this video took so long to come out that I've already played and 100% finished Majora's Mask. With 0 deaths as well, I might add, and I've also read its manga adaptation. Honestly, I really like the game. It might honestly be my favorite one so far, but as for the manga, well, I guess I'll have to wait for a video on that to come out, as well as the Majora's Mask video where I share my thoughts in detail with all of you. In all seriousness though, these videos take a long time to make, but that's not really the main issue. The main issue is the motivation. I finished the script of the Majora's Mask video literally months ago, like a few days after I completed the whole game, and that script actually ended up being longer than the Ocarina of Time one, so I bet you can imagine how thrilled I was thinking about how I was gonna have to edit a 30-hour long video. Again. And honestly, that was a really scary thought, because the last time I made an almost 3-hour long video, my computer almost fried itself to death. Like, I wish I could show you what rendering the Ocarina of Time video looked like, but I can't, because every time I tried rendering it, it would get to about 40% completion and then the screen would just go completely black and the computer would become unusable and I'd have to restart it physically via the reboot button. It's a miracle that video came out at all, because the Ocarina of Time video you ended up getting was actually a backup copy I managed to export a few days earlier, just to see if the audio levels were fine and all. And thank fuck I did that, because otherwise that would have been 10 months worth of work down the drain. So yeah, you can imagine I was not thrilled about doing the whole thing again. Of course, since then the script for the Majora's Mask video has changed a lot, and the final product will hopefully be shorter than the Ocarina of Time video, though that depends on how much I want to talk about Majora's Mask. And trust me, there's a lot I want to say about Majora's Mask. But I suppose that's both a blessing and a curse. People really want to see long-ass videos where a random guy on the internet talks about his favorite thing, but then the random guy on the internet has to actually sit down and make the long-ass video, and while making these videos is really exhausting, frankly, it's also a lot of fun to see it all come together, and it's even more fun to share these videos with all of you. So for those of you wondering if I'm retiring from making videos, That's not the case, for better or for worse. I've already said I'll be reviewing every single one of these mainline games, and that fact remains true, no matter how long it may take me to make these videos. I mean, I told you so in the Ocarina of Time video. We would get to Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess eventually, and obviously all of the other games. So don't worry, the Majora's Mask video will come out one day, hopefully in the first half of 2025. It'd be really cool if I could finish the video by May, since April 27th will be Majora's Mask's 25th anniversary. But until that video releases, hopefully this was a nice little present for all of you before the end of the year, even though I was supposed to post this over 6 months ago. Also, I finally posted those remaining 2 Majora's Mask streams that I never posted way back when I was supposed to. They should be up on the channel's past live streams playlist. And also, as I said, I'll try to set up the live streams to be on YouTube instead of Twitch. So once the Oracle Games streams roll around, they should be available here under the live streams tab. I'll see if I can set all of that up though, and I'll obviously notify you all about it at the end of the Majora's Mask video. Anyways, that concludes this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, I wish you all a belated Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.